Hello there, it's lovely to see you again on VITV with Into Vietnam News. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be updated on the economic and financial news across the country in the headlines. The World Bank says Vietnam GDP will grow modestly at 5.5% in 2014. The latest survey by the central bank shows optimism among local lenders on their business prospects in the second quarter. And CBRE says Vietnam housing recovery is hurt by low confidence. In its East Asia Pacific Economic Update report released on April the 7th, the World Bank said with limited progress in restructural reforms in banking and other sectors, the Vietnam's economy is expected to grow modestly at 5.5% in 2014. The estimation is based on the hypothesis that prudent macroeconomic policies will be implemented and the government will pursue a careful monetary policy and continue to put great focus on the reforming process, especially in state firms and local lenders, to liberate the private sector. The World Bank pointed out, despite improvement in macroeconomic conditions from 2013, Vietnam's GDP growth in 2014 is still below potential due to high risk from the restructuring process. The macroeconomic conditions will continue to be stabilized as inflation is falling and foreign investment are on the rise. The trade and current accounts of Vietnam are expected to enjoy a surplus in 2014, though at a lower level than that in 2013. The World Bank says the country's inflation will be within 7% on condition that growth is at modest level and there is no significant shock from the supply side. The State Bank of Vietnam has released a report on business plan of credit institutions and branches of foreign banks in Vietnam in the second quarter of 2014. It revealed the majority of banks showed optimism over the business operation. Most business institutions said their business got better in the first quarter of 2014, with obvious improvements from the end of 2013. 53% of survey banks quoted the business as positive, up from 29% in the previous survey, while 46.5% describe it as normal. A positive mood is upheld in banks from the second quarter to the end of this year. Notably, most lenders expect lending and deposit interest rates in the dong will continue to fall slightly in 2014. The average prices of goods and services are set to remain unchanged or even slid within a small margin in the second quarter, helping to encourage people to use banking products and services. According to the CBRE Group, Vietnam's property market's rebound from a 3-year slump may be delayed until 2015 as families struggle to access affordable loans and confidence lags. The CBRE reported only 1,500 condominiums were sold in Hanoi in the first quarter, while that's a 5-fold increase from 279 sold in the same period 2 years ago. It's still down from the peak in 2009, when more than 15,000 units were sold in the capital city. In Ho Chi Minh City, the first quarter sales more than tripled to 2,263. Thus compared to a peak of 13,000 condo sales in the city in 2010. CBRE said first quarter home sales reflect difficulties in the property market, where entire subdivisions on city outskirts remain unfinished and empty. The economy continues to be stimulated by bad debt at banks, of which a third were tied to sold property loans at the end of 2012. Lenders are putting together a loan package to stimulate the property market, and policymakers cut interest rate last month to bolster growth. The Vietnam's electricity group were estimated to have disbursed a total of 15.3 trillion dong, or $728 million for its power projects in the first quarter of this year. In details, EVN spent about 18.5 trillion dong or $879 million to invest into its power projects in the first 3 months of 2014, including 7.5 trillion dong in March. According to data announced by EVN, the group produced a total of 32 billion kilowatt-hour of power in the first 3 months of this year, rising 6.8% on year, including 12.12 billion kilowatt-hour of March. The Central Highland regions are now facing drought conditions with low water level at the hydropower reservoirs, but EVN still maintains operation at hydropower plants to ensure enough water for agriculture and living at downstream areas. The group says it would continue maximally exploiting thermal power and gas power sources. Hydropower plants will be reasonably exploited to regulate water for dry season. The EVN will also buy power from China with a reasonable price for the country's socio-economic development. Coming up since the program is some foreign trade news.
Vietnam export-import revenues reached $33.34 billion and $32.33 billion respectively in the first quarter of this year, resulting in trade surplus of more than $1 billion. After 2 months of decline, largely due to the Lunar New Year holidays, exports increased again this March, reaching $12 billion, a 25.8% increase from the previous month, and imports increased by 21.9% to $12.3 billion, leading to a trade surplus of $300 million, or 1.2% of total export and import revenues, except rubber and chemicals, which were similar to the previous month. All remaining items grew in terms of export revenue, including textiles and garments, reaching $1.6 billion, a 53% increase, seafood $600 million, a 30% increase, rice $255 million, a 30% increase, coffee $448 million, a 28% increase, and electronic ware $850 million, a 37% increase. Vietnam is the biggest rice supplier of Malaysia, shipping more than 658,000 tons of grain, worth $247 million to the market in 2013. Malaysian Minister of Agriculture said his country preferred Vietnamese rice due to its reasonable prices and high quality. Malaysia plans to increase the national rice output to reduce its dependence on imports by 2020. The intention came after the Memorandum of Understanding on Agricultural Cooperation with Vietnam was signed. Malaysia is among the countries with the biggest amount of rice imported from foreign markets. Last year, its rice imports increased to 1.1 million tons from 983,000 tons in 2012.
According to the National Center for Socio-Economic Information and Forecast, Vietnam has an abundant and increasing workforce. However, its current weakness is low quality or the training quality hardly meets practical requirements. It's alarmingly worrying that this is the main reason for increasing unemployment rate among Vietnamese workers, especially those in the working age.
According to the latest study by the Vietnam's Ministry of Labor, Employment and Social Affairs, the General Statistics Office, and the International Labour Organization, there are alarming few quality jobs for young people aged 15 to 29. Over half of these young workers do low productivity jobs. 8 out of 10 people do not have official jobs, and half of them have no regular jobs, as self-employment or temporary contracts. The drawback of Vietnam's labor force is low quality, and workers' vocational knowledge and skills do not meet the requirements of practical work, as well as the labor market's demand.
Những cái người lao động mà có cái trình độ chuyên môn như vậy mà lại thất nghiệp, đấy, mà trong khi đó thì coi như là thị trường lao động của ta lại cần là những cái lao động coi như tức là kiểu như mình gọi là thừa thầy thiếu thợ. Thế thì rõ ràng, hiển nhiên ở đây rõ ràng là có một cái vấn đề chất lượng đào tạo, cũng như là cái nội dung đào tạo ngành nghề, cũng như là các cấp học cao đẳng đại học là có nhiều vấn đề. Tôi nghĩ rằng là nó có rất nhiều vấn đề. Ví dụ chẳng hạn như là cái đào tạo nghề của mình, đấy là ra coi như là chưa đáp ứng được với cái nhu cầu thực tiễn, cái đòi hỏi của thị trường lao động cũng như những cái đơn vị mà sử dụng lao động. Nếu người ta có coi như tuyển dụng thì người ta cũng phải đào tạo lại.
Additionally, graduates find it harder and harder to get employed. According to the Institute of Labor Science and Social Affairs, it is also an alarming situation.
Trong xã hội, trong gia đình cũng như trong từng cá nhân là cái tâm lý bằng cấp có. Cho nên chúng ta cố gắng đạt được một cái bằng cấp nào đó, bằng cấp cử nhân, bằng cấp thạc sĩ, thậm chí bằng cấp tiến sĩ. Cái tâm lý của chúng ta đi học nhưng mà chưa tính hoặc thậm chí ít tính đến cái nhu cầu của xã hội, nhu cầu của thị trường lao động. Hệ thống giáo dục của chúng ta, giáo dục đào tạo dạy nghề nói chung vẫn theo định hướng cung.
The latest statistics of the Ministry of Labor, Invalids and Social Affairs shows in the first quarter 2013, there were 900,000 people unemployed, accounting for 1.9% of the labor force, up 48,000 people over the same period in 2012. Notably, the unemployment rate among young workers remains high, accounting for 5.95%.
Thưa quý vị, chất lượng nguồn lao động của Việt Nam hiện nay còn rất thấp, trong khi nhu cầu sử dụng lao động có tay nghề chất lượng cao của các doanh nghiệp lại liên tục tăng. Điều này dẫn đến nguồn lao động của Việt Nam dồi dào, nhu cầu việc làm lớn, nhưng các doanh nghiệp vẫn rơi vào tình trạng thiếu lao động. Đây cũng chính là một trong những nguyên nhân dẫn đến việc thất nghiệp ngày càng gia tăng của Việt Nam hiện nay.
The International Labour Organization in Vietnam said specific solutions in both short and medium terms are needed to address the problem.
In developing the framework for human resources in a country, obviously, through its industry planning, through its legal frameworks for a whole range of different laws that would support the skill development of the workforce. Particularly among those, of course, is the vocational training and skills program of skills are required, maybe different workers going to different countries, but also coming here from other countries. So there's all sorts of role for government. But once a worker leaves that education system, then it's usually the employer that has the main responsibility for the human resource development. And that's where the employer has also a responsibility in terms of training, in terms of supporting workers in developing their own potential.
According to experts, the authorities should also actively organize short-term training schools for workers to cultivate and enhance practical knowledge and professional skills. The propagation and encouragement for workers to learn and improve their knowledge and skills for themselves are necessary. It does not only have workers find employment opportunities for themselves, but also gradually overcome the weaknesses in the quality of the country's current workforce.
The program will wrap up with local gold prices, forex and stock market on April the 7th. Well, that's the news on VITV. Thank you so much for your time with us. Have a nice week ahead and bye-bye for now.